As promised in the intro, today's whole episode is about emergency funds, and I'm going to get things started with what I think, in hindsight, is a pretty comical story of when I needed to use my emergency fund. Okay, so this story goes back to my last internship before I graduated school. My wife and I had just barely started dating. She was in Kansas working a program called Totus Tuus, moving around the state, and I was naturally in Salt Lake City. Now, one of the perks of this particular internship I was on was that housing was included for the summer. So here's the way that my boss handled getting me housing for this summer internship. There was a little development not too far from downtown where a friend of a friend or a client had this rental property. Now, the top part of the rental property was being rented out to, I think, 2 or 3 women. I didn't really talk to them much. But the basement was an Airbnb. And my boss had acquired the Airbnb for the full 3 months that I was interning. Now, the basement, I hate to say it, seemed a little jank. Seemed like the kitchen was MacGyvered together so that a otherwise normal basement could function as a full-blown Airbnb. Now, while I was on this internship, I was trying to build my experiment for my thesis in school, and so I needed a little bit of space. It was only a couple weeks into the summer, I decided I was going to rearrange the furniture. In doing so, to accommodate, again, me trying to build my thesis, I woke up the population that lived in the bed. That's right, there were bed bugs, but worse, the bed bug population that was living there from the previous individual who had rented out the Airbnb was being decimated by spiders. So I woke up the next morning with the telltale lines of bites that you see from bug bites, along with a series of other bites on both my arms with 2 little puncture holes. Those were spider bites. I got to work that morning a little bit late. My boss asked me what was up, and I told him that I wasn't quite feeling myself as I just found out that I had bed bugs and was suffering from a number of spider bites. He took one look at my arms and was like, that's not going to do, so we're going to move you. Later that day, all of my stuff was heat blasted with steam and parked in a car on the top of a hill. It was an incredibly hot summer, and I successfully managed to prevent any bed bugs from following me to my next location. I moved into a hotel temporarily for a couple days while my boss worked on getting my next housing arrangement, which, even though it was further away from the office, got me very excited, as the only place that my boss could find for the remainder of my internship was located in Park City. This was like a ski lodge area that was actually for sale. Someone was trying to sell it. It was part of a bigger building, think condo type development. My boss told me in the office, hey, I found this Airbnb in Park City. I think that's where I'm going to have you go. It's for sale, but what are the odds that it sells out from under you? So I pack up everything into my Infiniti G35 sedan again, and I drive 45 minutes from the office up to this Airbnb and get situated. And this thing was nice. It was newly renovated, and I couldn't have asked for a nicer place for any internship. It's really too bad that I didn't get to stay there that long. Now, it was while I was living here in the ski lodge sort of Airbnb that the exciting adventure with my radiator kicks in. Now, I mentioned at the start of the story that my wife and I had only just barely started dating, so we were calling each other frequently. She was going on a girls' trip this summer after finishing Totus Tuus, and for some reason, thought it would be a good idea to get up at 2 a.m. in order to start the drive to make it to their destination. I was worried sick about this because I was the typical new boyfriend, head over heels, over worried about everything, and I just didn't sleep that night. Which is funny because since being married, we've done much crazier things after midnight. Without digressing too far, one time we were in Wyoming. After having Oliver, we were traveling back from the holidays, and there was this big snowstorm coming in. We had made it to our hotel just barely at midnight. I had gotten just a tiny bit of sleep. Amanda was feeding Oliver and was looking at the storm and was like, hey, Jay, if we don't get up and leave now, we're going to get snowed in. So we ended up driving from like 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. from Wyoming through the edge of a snowstorm back to Salt Lake City. I digress. I didn't sleep that night because Amanda was getting up really early and I was worried about her safety in driving. She was fine. Nothing really happened on that trip. But when I got up for my 45-minute commute, I was tired. I was dead tired. I just barely remembered to pack the lunch that I had that day. It was a can of tuna and an avocado. I was doing this keto diet thing, and that was what I had for lunch. You just take an avocado, hopefully it's really ripe. You cut it up into cubes, dump it into the bowl of tuna, you stir it up. That's all that you have for lunch. I was functioning okay throughout the morning. I had gotten my free office coffee and was going through my to-do list, but lunchtime rolled around, and The lack of sleep was hitting me. I was trying to scoop the avocado out and it was extra ripe. And I ended up just getting avocado all over the front of my pants. It was embarrassing. I cleaned myself up as best I could, but you could still tell that I had just slopped avocado all over my slacks.
Oh, come on!
Okay, the rest of the workday was relatively uneventful. I survived, and I was getting ready for my final drive back to Park City. And here's the thing. It was one of the hottest days of the whole summer. It was over 100 degrees out. And when you drive from Salt Lake City up to Park City, you basically are driving from the bottom of the valley up into the heartland of ski country. You're going uphill on a highway, cranking 65 to 70 miles an hour, maybe 75 miles an hour for some stretches. I can't remember the speed limit. And it's hot. And I'm driving this 2004 Infiniti G35 going up the hill, and I turn one corner. I'm getting ready to pass a semi, and I punched the gas just to find that the vehicle was lacking power. It didn't have the jump, the go, the push that I was expecting. It was not responsive, which is not good coming from any car, let alone a sports sedan. So I looked down at the gauges as I'm driving, trying to figure it out, and I noticed that the little temperature gauge that tells you how hot things are running is almost in the red. And the more that I try to work the gas, the closer it gets. And I'm going like straight uphill. This thing is steep. I don't know if I'm going to make it. So I start slowing down. I go into the right lane. I put the hazards on. I'm trying to feather it a little bit so that as the temperature drops, for me not giving it too much gas, I can then get it going a little bit, get over another part of the hill. If it flattens out or dips a little bit as I'm working up the mountain, I could give it a break. And I made it just to the very peak, right before you come down a slope that eventually leads a couple exits down to where I was going to pull off and take a right turn to Park City. And it was right at the peak of that hill that the little temperature gauge went over to the red and the car had basically hit overheating. I had no idea what was wrong. I knew it was a hot day. I'd never seen this sort of behavior personally firsthand in a car. So I pull off onto this truck stop behind a semi, which has its front wide open and it's smoking. I get out and I go around to the front of the car. I press my pants up against the grill of the car as I'm working on getting the hood open. I'm tired. I'm a little delirious. And I didn't notice that the grill of the vehicle was covered with some sort of fluid all over, which mixed in nicely with the avocado to the point that if someone asked me, I didn't have to tell them that most of the stuff on me was avocado. It was radiator fluid. It was coolant. After I got the car open, it was very obvious that it was overheating. You could see things were steaming. And looking in and around the radiator, you could see that it was cracked. And out of that crack is where all the fluid had sprayed out onto the front of the car. So what am I supposed to do now? I am closer to making it back to my ski lodge Airbnb than I am turning around and going back to Salt Lake City and asking my friend Matthew, who lives in downtown, hey, can I get a ride or stay with you? I didn't know what was going to happen. And also, I had to get to work the next day. I don't have my car now. What am I supposed to do to get to work? I don't know anyone up in the Park City area to give me a ride, and I certainly didn't want to rent a car out of all this. And so here's one of the first things I did. I called Matthew and I told him about the situation. My car is toast. I'm calling a tow truck. I need you to come up to Park City, pick me up, and bring me back to downtown Salt Lake so that I can sleep in your apartment and walk to work with you. He's walking distance from the office. That way I don't miss a beat when it comes to work. And to thank Matthew, I told him that I was going to be dropped off by the tow truck driver at the grocery store next to my Airbnb. I was going to pick up some groceries and I was going to cook him a dinner. Matthew did not need me to do that in order to pull a favor, but he was very grateful because he didn't have any plans for dinner that evening. Next thing I did was call Amanda and explain everything that was going on. I don't remember if I got a hold of her or not. I may have left a weird message along the lines of, I am tired, I am covered in avocado and radiator fluid, my car is smoking by the side of the road, call me when you get a chance. Because I was that kind of boyfriend. And in the mix of things, I had also called a tow truck and got them scheduled to take me to a gas station mechanic that was a little ways back. And while I waited for the tow truck, I talked to the semi-truck driver who was stopped in front of my car. Turns out that his vehicle, his truck, had overheated as well. We were both sort of in the same boat. Okay, so the tow truck driver picked me up. I get it to the gas station mechanic. They are wrapping up for the day. They said they'd look at it tomorrow, give me a call to tell me what happened. And he was courteous enough, the tow truck driver, to give me a ride back to that grocery store. I ended up buying, I think, like coconut milk and chicken and some other random stuff. And I hauled a whole bunch of grocery bags from the grocery store to the condo. I looked like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. I had no idea what I was making for this dinner, but I put something together in the 30 minutes that I had before Matthew got there. The one thing I remember putting into the chicken, other than the chicken and the coconut and reducing the coconut whatever into a sauce, was that like every other action I had in the kitchen, I was yelling out some sort of obscure Jim Carrey line from a weird comedy movie.
I know there's a lot riding on it, but it's all psychological. Just gotta stay in a positive frame of mind.
Matthew got there and he didn't seem to mind that most of the recipe was Jim Carrey quotes because he thought it was delicious. I quite frankly thought it was good too. It wasn't overcooked. It made for a good meal, and I was in good spirits, all things considered, because I had an emergency fund. No matter what this car was going to throw at me, I was going to be able to go back to that mechanic, that gas station mechanic, and I was going to be able to pay him to just fix the car. This was going to be a minor inconvenience that interrupted me for a couple days. How bad could it be? I've been through enough this summer. It can't get any worse. I stayed with Matthew for a day or two. They ended up replacing the radiator. They told me it was cracked open like a coconut. If I would have gotten an OEM radiator, it would have cost an arm and a leg. But they found an aftermarket one that was available for my vehicle, surprisingly, not too far away, and they were able to fix it for well less than what my emergency fund was, even as a college student on his last internship. Now, I don't want to leave any stone unturned. I got to fill you in. That apartment, that Airbnb, did sell out from under me that summer. So I ended up moving out of it into another ski lodge, which was significantly smaller. It was a studio with a Murphy bed. Shortly after moving into it, Amanda came up to visit me that summer. And I didn't want us to be sharing that space because we were only dating. So she stayed in that lodge, and I got myself a different Airbnb. It was like the upstairs attic for this older couple who had just started Airbnb slightly outside of Park City, Utah. The visit didn't last very long. I moved back into my studio for the last week of my internship. And while I was there, for that last week, the boiler in the building blew up. So I didn't have any water. No hot water, no cold water, no sink, no toilet, no nothing. So for every day that last week, I got up without having a restroom to go to, without having a shower, got into my car, drove my 45-minute commute, smelly and stinky from the night, getting into the office, in my pajamas, in my bedhead. I'd shower at the office, do my whole morning routine, and get to my desk. And I moved out before that thing was fixed, so I don't know how long it took for anyone else who was staying there. It's funny, the biggest inconveniences and the biggest roadblocks that I remember from that wild summer didn't actually tie to the car and the expense with the car and having to sacrifice in order to save up to accommodate the broken radiator. It more had to do with just the inconvenience of my time and having to move again and again and being eaten by spiders and not having running water for a week. And those were things that weren't in my control and things that I wasn't financially responsible for. So they didn't impact my emergency fund. But that's what we're going to talk about now. Your fully funded emergency fund. HopeFilled Financial Footstep number 4.